The clip you just saw was of 46-year-old Thomas Maimoni, who was prosecuted with charges of murder for Martha Brailsford. But what makes this case take a sick twist is when law enforcement caught him with the help of a local witch in Salem, Laurie Cabot.
I see Martha on a sailboat with a man. And he's looking in a mirror and he's shaving off his mustache.
On July 12, 1991, in Salem, Massachusetts, 37-year-old aspiring local artist and interior designer Martha Brailsford decided on taking a short sail trip towards the Willow Pier with her friend and neighbor Thomas Tom Maimoni. The recently widowed man was heartbroken and seeks solace within the company of Martha. The quick trip was the ideal breakaway both had been looking for. But what happens next ties into a tragic tale of Salem's history. What happened on that boat trip? Where did Martha Brailsford disappear? And how did Salem's local witch help them out? Salem, Massachusetts, the land of folklore. Situated right on top of Boston along the north coast of Massachusetts, it's the ideal coastal location for tourists. But that's not what makes it famous. Apart from the bewitching seaside charm, its maritime history, and spellbinding beauty, the land hides a dark secret. Founded in 1626 by Roger Conant, the town is infamous for its witch trials dating back to 1692. Within that period of May to October, more than 300 years back, 19 individuals, mostly being women, were hanged and many others were imprisoned due to the suspicion of devil worshipping. The incident began when a few young girls claimed that they were possessed by the devil and subsequently accused 3 Salem women, including Tituba, a West Indian slave, of witchcraft. As Tituba, along with the other accusers, were publicly pressured into giving false confessions, public hysteria rose to a fever pitch. Whereas the superstitious beliefs amongst the town melted down over the years, the successors of the witch's bloodline still remain to be in power. In 1991, Martha Conant Brailsford, a direct descendant to the town's founder Roger, crossed paths with Thomas. And the tragic tale of the town repeated its past once again. Known for her soft and kind-hearted nature, Martha Laurel Conant Brailsford was the gem of the family. Born in Hackensack, New Jersey on May 8, 1954, she was raised in Chicago and Cleveland, where the roots of her compassionate character took hold. Martha's journey was shaped by the loving guidance of her parents, Norma Freymoth Conant and Herbert Conant. Martha was raised in a household filled with love and warmth. Her parents, Norma and Herbert, instilled in her the values of compassion and empathy, qualities that would later define her character. Martha's familial bonds extended beyond her parents as she shared her life with 2 sisters, Muriel Conant Garvey and Carrie Sheffman, as well as a brother, David Conant. The Conant family was a close-knit unit, and Martha's presence only added to the harmony that enveloped their home. From an early age, Martha always shared a passion for art. Painting and designing were an integral part of her life. Upon entering Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts, she continued to work for her passion and deliberately showcased great ambition in her courses. Around that same time, she met her future husband, Brian Brailsford, as a freshman. Martha was known amongst her peers for her diligent character. Apart from her studies, she took part in various movements, especially for animal rights. Her art often showcased underwater scenes of flowing water, turtles, and fish. She felt greatly connected to the sea, almost in a spiritual way. After completing an associate degree in 1973 and a bachelor's degree in German from Boston University in 1975, Martha followed her art through and operated a fashion enterprise, which she called Uncommon Threads, and established her own interior design firm. She also grew closer to Brian due to their shared interest in sailing, ocean, and art, and started dating soon after. Their relationship grew on to lead towards marriage, and the couple decided on moving to Willows Bay, Massachusetts from Ohio to live near their dreams. Martha and her husband both were known to be adventurous. Snow skiing, sailing, windsurfing, and extreme sports were what the couple lived for. Martha wanted to experience the thrill of sea life and get back to her ancestral roots. The history of her bloodline showed that Martha's great-grandfather was the founder of the land of Salem. With the renowned background of art and also the ancestral land of Martha's great-grandfathers, She felt as if Salem was calling out for her. Brian was also a captain for a cruise ship company and enjoyed his leisure time being near the Bay Area along with his dear wife. The couple moved in from New Jersey during the early 1980s in hopes of a new start. The town was a closely knit neighborhood. Being right beside Willow Bay Point, most of the residents were nautical, and sailing was a big hobby, and sharing the same ideals, they got along with everyone in no time. Martha would spend most of her day working on her art. The only time she could be seen stepping out of the house was when she'd take her dog, Rudy, out for a walk. And often during these walks, she would come across their neighbor, Thomas Maimoni. Both would engage in small chats and walk around the neighborhood with their dogs, and soon enough, the random encounters blossomed into a great friendship. On July 12, 1991, Thomas shared the grave news of his wife passing away from cancer. The devastated widower was looking for anything that would distract him from his sorrows and requested of Martha if she could take some of her time to go out with him on a short sailing trip. Martha couldn't refuse the offer of her friend and agreed to meet him in the afternoon at the Willows Pier. She left her dog Rudy tied up just outside and her unfinished artwork drying on the deck. She knew she'd be back before sundown and didn't feel like a rush to get everything inside. She went off to join the man recently laid off from his engineering job at Parker Brothers, whom she believed was a grieving widower and in need of help. After meeting up with them on Counterpoint, Thomas's sailboat, the two headed off towards Winter Island Pier. As the trip began, Martha would soon start to feel something was off. She was in the moment, enjoying the cool, windy breeze stroking her skin and the beautiful scenery. Thomas would slowly try to get closer to her, and the naive woman at first didn't get a hunch of the situation, but things started to escalate. Thomas would try to make sexual advances toward Martha, and both would get into a heated argument. She demanded to be taken back to the shore, and she fought back. He continued to fight her and, in a rage, struck off an item from the boat towards the back of her head. The blunt force was enough to kill poor Martha. This wasn't how he planned things out, and in the panic-stricken moment, he decided on tying down Martha's unconscious body with a small anchor and dumping her overboard. When Brian got back home, he noticed Rudy on the porch along with Martha's artworks drying outside. This was quite unusual, as she'd never be out this late, but after searching the entire house, Brian went out to ask people about Martha's whereabouts. The neighborhood came together with the search party and started looking for her. Brian went to Thomas's house to check on whether he'd seen Martha that morning, as they would often go for walks with their dogs, but the door was left unanswered. The friends and locals, along with Brian, would spend the entire night inspecting every corner of the streets in search of Martha. Brian would call the hospitals and give her description, but soon it would all turn to vain. After waiting out till the morning when there were no new signs of Martha's return, Brian would turn to law enforcement for help. The Department of Massachusetts appointed a team for the missing report and started investigating right away. Thomas, being the last person Martha might have interacted with, started from his house. This time around, he answered the door. He was questioned whether he saw Martha walking her dog the previous morning or might have taken her out sailing. He said he interacted with her for a short while around 7 a.m. when he took his dog out for a walk. But Thomas said he walked back home immediately after and hadn't seen her since. He denied to have ever taken her out on a sailing trip, as it might give a wrong impression. He was a married man and didn't want any unnecessary trouble. Thomas's statement soon turned out to be false. A few neighbors stated that they remembered Martha going out to the pier to sail with a friend. They chatted along while she was on the way that afternoon. The statement was even confirmed by a proprietor from a boat shop who said he saw Thomas and Martha around 1 p.m. getting on a boat together. Police were eventually starting to gain suspicion over Thomas due to his false testaments. He was called out to the station for further interrogation. Thomas changed his whole story and confessed that he did take Martha to the Winter Island Pier, where she got off the boat. Soon after, Thomas changed his story yet again. He said to Detective Konrad Prosnewski, Martha was standing in front of the boat when a rogue wave hit it. Thomas tried to help her, but she lost her balance and hit the back of her head. She fell over the side and disappeared into the deep waters off Gloucester. He claimed that he searched for her all night, but couldn't get any glimpse of her. Police didn't buy his story, but did hire a search team to be on the lookout. After a tireless investigation of 6 consecutive days, they found nothing. The investigating officers couldn't wrap their heads around why Thomas didn't file any missing report right away. He failed to radio any authorities after Martha accidentally fell overboard and didn't even contact the police after returning ashore, and resorted to false statements during the beginning of the investigation, which further delayed the case. Even though he claimed that he got nervous and panicked in the moment, which led him to flee the scene, police were highly doubtful and didn't have any proof against him to testify. At last they turned to Laurie Cabot, the official witch of Salem, for help. Though the times have passed, the beliefs of Salem's people remain akin. Most choose to turn towards their local psychic or witches rather than their priests when they feel helpless. This has outgrown some very controversial arguments, but one can't deny the psychic abilities these women possess. Laurie Cabot, the official witch of Salem, was renowned for her psychic abilities. When Captain Paul Murphy came to her, she asked about the victim's name, where she lived, and date of birth. After Laurie got the information she needed, she got into a relaxed frame of mind, which the locals also call her alpha state. Laurie started narrating the events of July 12, 1991. In her vision, she described Martha as a naive individual. She saw how Thomas tried to make advances towards Martha, but she reluctantly declined. The situation got heated, and the two got into an argument, during which Thomas hit her on the head with an object. After attacking her severely, he apparently tied her waist down with a weight and her feet with a small anchor and dumped her body overboard. Laurie predicted that her body was still anchored underwater near a small island with a lighthouse in the view. On July 18, 1991, within hours of Laurie's prediction, the Department of Massachusetts would get a call from Hooper Goodwin, a local lobster fisherman who was near the offshore of Marblehead.
Who's silly enough to lose their anchor around here? What Sunday six-pack captain lost this? And then I went over to look at the anchor, and then I noticed there was some line and the line dangling down the side of the trap. I noticed what appeared to be a body.
While he was checking on his traps, he found one of them return to the surface with an anchor attached to it. Hooper went in further to inspect the trap and found some rope and a fishing line dangling from it, which went into the water. As he took notice of the line which dangled down the side of the trap, he discovered the decomposed body of Martha Brailsford. The body was found in the exact position as Laurie predicted in her visions. There was an anchor which was tied to her foot, and a lead diving belt encircled her waist. Martha's body was completely nude when found, with several blows to her head and jaw. The location, too, was eerily identical near a small offshore island with a lighthouse in view. Thomas would flee the town as soon as the news of Martha's body being found would hit the neighborhood. The autopsy report confirmed that Martha's death was caused due to blunt trauma at the back of her head. She received a total of 5 blows, including her head and jaw. The body was partially decomposed as it was underwater for a long period of time, but as Thomas was already on the run and the investigation had already pointed out towards him, it was more than enough to convict him for the crime. Flyers were out all over the town, and every station in Salem was looking for him. Captain Murphy, on the other hand, didn't spare a single second and went back to Laurie for help. During this vision, Laurie conjured up a figure like Thomas looking up in the mirror. She found him shaving his head and mustache. She said he was in a frantic state and was gravely unsure of his next move. Thomas briefly thought of going towards south or west. However, he changed his mind and decided on going toward Canada. Laurie wanted to make sure that he ends up behind bars, so she offered to cast a spell to derail Thomas's plans. She used a straw doll and named it Thomas Tom Maimoni. Then she wrapped a white cord around it. Laurie went back to her alpha state and projected that he would end up doing something stupid. On July 20th, 1991, a policeman in the town of Waite in northern Maine near the Canadian border got a call from vigilant locals. They said that they spotted an unfamiliar car parked outside a cabin that was supposed to be vacant. Officers were dispatched immediately to the scene, and upon their arrival, they discovered signs of forced entry. The intruder, who was found sleeping on the couch, was none other than Thomas himself. He'd shaved his mustache and was on his way to cross the Canadian border, just as Laurie predicted. Thomas was taken straight to the Massachusetts courtroom for his hearing. Captain Murphy said it's hard to tell whether or not Laurie's spell actually worked, but Thomas did end up doing something stupid. He broke into a cabin in a neighborhood where people took notice of everything, whether or not something's misplaced or out of the ordinary, and nothing would pass by their eyes. Not only that, he decided on staying the night, which was a fairly dumb move. The first thing that Maimoni said after his arrest was, "I killed a woman in Massachusetts." Thomas was convicted with a second-degree murder following a trial in 1993 in Newburyport Superior Court, where he pleaded his innocence. He maintained his original story, where Thomas took Martha out on a sailing trip, and later she got hit by a rogue wave, which knocked her overboard. He also claimed the reason Martha was found without any clothes on was because he pulled her back into the boat and removed them to prevent hypothermia. Thomas added that after he realized how seriously injured Martha was, he panicked. At that moment, he rushed without thinking. He tied up the anchor onto her feet and a weight around her body and dumped her overboard. He proclaimed that the blows on her head were caused by the lobsterman when he pulled up her body, but during the autopsy, it was clearly stated that the injuries caused to Martha's body occurred prior to her death. Prosecutors were sure that Thomas tricked Martha into coming on board for the sailing trip. Martha's sister, Muriel Conant Garvey, shared that her sister previously told how bad she felt for her widowed neighbor, Thomas Maimoni, over a call. Thomas had also previously lured in women with similar lies to take advantage of them. In reality, he's had 3 divorces in the past and was married to his 4th wife, Patricia, who was unaware of his last 2 marriages. The court brought in 2 other victims of Thomas who shared their stories with the jury. On July 8, 1991, only a handful of days prior to Martha's murder, Thomas took Rosemary Farmer out for sailing, whom he befriended by using the same ruse. He said that he was unmarried as his wife recently died due to cancer. As soon as they were away from the shore, Thomas started to show his true intentions. Rosemary got alarmed once he started to display sexual advances. He shared about his sexual encounters with other women on the boat and tried to get close to her. Thomas soon became sexually aggressive and began to touch Rosemary's arms, legs, and shoulders against her will. He also dropped down his bathing suit and sailed for the rest of the trip naked. In another encounter with Roxy Platt, she mentioned that they met in a similar way as Martha when she was walking her dog. Roxy struck up a conversation with Thomas regarding his little corgi. Thomas docked his boat, Counterpoint, in Marblehead, just outside where Roxy lived. He fed her the same lies about a wife dying and began a casual friendship with her. There was a pattern in Thomas's victims, all being in their early 40s, either married or single, and he'd often lie about his job and personal relationships to get his way. He was a bag full of lies, of heroic deeds and fake jobs. Roxy was a licensed psychotherapist and considered Thomas to be a threat. She sent the parole board a letter opposing his release. Roxy Platt shared that she was with Thomas not long before Martha's disappearance. They were on Counterpoint when suddenly Thomas's friendly nature turned sexual. He started making lewd jokes and stories, then stripped all his clothes off. Roxy said to the court that she was quite disturbed and averted her eyes while making a joke about the awkward situation. Thomas tried to sexually assault her by repeatedly touching her against her will. He refused to take her back home, and while they were at the galley below deck, Thomas grabbed down below her waist and tried to pull her into the sleep cabin. Roxy somehow managed to get out of his grasp and ran up the stairs towards the deck, but Thomas caught up with her and held himself against her body. Roxy continued to resist and finally convinced Thomas to sail back home. The court appealed that Thomas's mental state showcases sexual aggressiveness. He shows almost no remorse towards his victims and is considered a pathological liar who lures in his victims with false information to fulfill his sexual desires. Though Thomas never revealed his exact purpose of the murder, everyone who knew Martha Brailsford was quite aware of her nature. She wasn't one to back down from what's right. If she discovered that she was lured for illicit purposes to Thomas's boat, she would have been morally outraged, said Brian's mother, Frances Wamsek. Thomas knew that Martha would have felt so enraged that as soon as they hit the shore, she'd take legal action and word would spread throughout the neighborhood. This was his only way out to save his back. In the end, the jury did not believe Maimoni. They found him guilty of second-degree murder in Martha's death. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Detective Prosniewski said in his interview that he was willing to take any help given to do justice to the case. Both he, along with Captain Murphy and several other officers, felt that Laurie had a huge hand bringing Thomas Maimoni to justice. In 2006, Thomas became eligible for parole. However, it was later denied. It was also denied during 2011 and 2016 parole hearings. During the hearings, he claimed that there was a conspiracy to frame him and that several people, including Laurie, were involved. He continued to maintain that Martha's death was an accident. On April 18, 2017, he died in prison at the age of 72. The bizarre nature of the case dragged in an ominous amount of media, books, documentaries, and several articles were printed which twisted the entire story in their own ways. Margaret Press, a fiction writer who was attending the case during the trials, thought of it as an educational project. Later, she printed her book, Counterpoint: Murder on Massachusetts Bay, detailing the horrifying entrails of the case. Margaret said that during Thomas's exhausting testimony on the horrific incident, where he described Martha as his first mate, she felt as if she was experiencing it herself. The book was a work of fiction and had some information that was far from the actual truth. Family members of the victim wrote letters to newspapers discounting its accuracy and asking people not to read it. The story of Martha Brailsford serves as a cautionary tale on how even the nicest, most charming faces can hide a devil behind them. It's said that 1 in every 25 people can turn out to be a sociopath. In a land where the witches help out the needy and the good ones often turn out to be the assailant, Martha was just another victim who made the mistake of trusting the wrong one. While Salem still lives on with its legends and stories that are far from usual, this makes one think, do you really believe in ghosts and witches? Is there a chance that Thomas may be innocent? Do you think the local witch of Salem was really the underlying hero in the case, or is there an even bigger conspiracy hiding underneath that's yet to be discovered? Let us know your thoughts and theories regarding today's story in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.